Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Sunday, September 15th. It's a little bit after noon, about 1 o'clock. I'm just taking a nice Sunday stroll through the timber again and checking to see if any of the storm systems that we had come through this week had anything to do with an additional acorn drop. Stay tuned. So one of the things that I'm doing today too is I'm trying to establish some tree stand locations that I think are going to be ideal given what I've been trying to set up for the last several weeks. And what I'm thinking is that tree right there is going to be just about perfect for what I need in this spot. Now, we'll see some other tree stand locations here pretty soon. Now, the reason I like this tree so much is that it's really tall. And honestly, it's pretty straight. It's got a little bit of bend and a little bit of weave to it, but it's not bad. And it looks like I can probably climb up anywhere between 20 and 30 feet and be just fine, giving me a great overview of the area around me. And when the leaves eventually do come down, the visibility is going to be fantastic. Now, one of the things that I've done today too is I've actually turned the direction of this camera about 25 to 30 degrees around this tree trunk. What I'm trying to do is clear a little more of the ground in front of it so that I can see which direction the deer are moving a little bit more. I feel like I've got a pretty good feeling now for which direction they were coming into the other angle, but some additional validation would be nice too to get some extra cover. Now back to the tree that I was talking about setting up in. It's the one right in the center of the frame. As I go up the tree trunks in front of it as well as the one in the back where I plan on setting up a stand, you can tell that I'm going to have to clear out some foliage and clear out some limbs so that I can have a decent shooting lane. But I believe that's going to be pretty easy to do. I just need to get it done. Now, something else that I'm doing today too is I'm checking a couple of spots that have traditionally been locations of rubs and scrapes, and I'll describe those in a little more detail as we go along. But what I want to do first is show you this old rub. It's very important that you are able to distinguish between what's old and what's new, and I'm going to illustrate that for you right now. All right, now this right here is a great example of an old rub, what we call a rub. Now what this is it's where the buck has scraped the tree with his antlers. This is one of those things that they do primarily to initially get the velvet or the skin covering off of their antlers as they grow and as they harden at the very tail end of that growth period. But one of the things that they do too is they mark trees with glands that are at the sides of their eyes, their muzzles, the occipital glands, and they're leaving their scent on these trees. Well, one of the things that can be helpful as you're going around and you're reviewing the timber and scouting and doing those kinds of things is looking and gauging at the size of the trees themselves. Now this tree right here, I'm going to put my hand down here so that you can see. I'm next to it. I'm not going to touch it. You don't ever want to touch these things because they do have scent on them that's natural. But I would gauge that this tree is probably an inch and a half in diameter. Just a small tree. But when you're dealing with really big bucks, they can actually gouge out trees that are 4, 5, 6 inches in diameter, and those are the kinds of things that get people really excited. They certainly get me excited. Walking around, look for trees that look like they've been shaved with a knife, a machete, a stick, something, that the bark has just been completely scraped off and gouged into the tree trunk itself. Those are going to be good indications of buck sign. Hey folks, I just got to this spot where I deposited that fresh corn last time, and I'm looking around through here, and there is nothing here. I don't see, well, there's a little bit of a piece of a cracked corn kernel right down there in front of me a couple of feet, but I mean, for the rest of the story, there is nothing here. So whatever it was, they hit this pretty hard. Shuffled some of the leaves around. I'll put some more down here in just a second. And just there's a couple of kernels right down there. There's one right there. There's a cracked one that's been taken care of, one or two here and there, but really not that much. So we'll see what we got. There's absolutely no question that the acorns are falling more aggressively right now. There's an area of the property that the leaves are completely torn up, and we're talking about an area of coverage that's probably, I'm going to say, I don't know, 45, 50 yards wide, probably 45, 50 yards long or deep, where the leaves are just completely torn up and shuffled up and things like that. So the acorns are absolutely falling. Now, there are still some really good acorns in the trees. There will be for a while, but this is an active feeding pattern of the deer right now, and that's something to take note of. Like I said earlier, deer season starts in 2 weeks for archery, and this is one of those areas that's going to be a hot spot early.
Most of what I'm finding right now that's dropping is pin oak. There are some white oak acorns on the ground, but there's no question that the vast majority of what's falling right now is pin oak. As I'm walking around looking at these acorns and looking up into the trees that are producing them, that's what I'm running
Sitting
across.
underneath a stand of white oak trees, and the acorns are dropping out of the pin oaks, and that's what the deer are eating right now. I'm in the wrong place. So pay attention to the trees as well, and what they are, and where they're dropping. That will give you indication as to where you need to be, where you need to move your stand to, if that's changing, and how you need to proceed in the days and the weeks ahead.
Here's another hunting tip for those of you who may not have hunted very long or are brand new to the sport. This right here, I'm looking down a creek bed that weaves left and right, back and forth as it goes down the hill. Now behind me, it comes off of the side of a hill, and this right here is one of those areas that becomes a very well-traveled corridor for deer, especially when the winds start picking up in the late fall and throughout the winter. They try desperately to get out of the wind. These are good places for them to bed down and stock up while storm systems and things like that pass through. In fact, you can see a couple of deadfall logs there. It's not uncommon at all for deer to bed up underneath those logs or right next to those logs out of the wind. They're just like people in that regard. They don't like getting cold either, and so they do what they can to stay warm. And this is the uphill side of that creek bed that I just showed you in the video going down. Now, one of the things to remember is that deer travel most commonly the path of least resistance. That happens with everyday travel, but it becomes extremely important when you're trying to track a wounded animal, because when they're wounded, they almost always travel the path of least resistance. So be sure and look for that as you're trailing your animal.
So this right here is another one of those areas that I'm watching really closely. I've seen a good amount of activity right here, and one of the things that I'm looking for too is tree stand placement here. Now, a lot of the trees are a whole lot shorter than the one that I showed you earlier in this video, so I've got to be really careful about my stand selection. But what I'm thinking is that that one right there would be extremely good for what I'm trying to accomplish right here in this stand location. I practice what I preach. Bring water. Always, always, always stay hydrated. I'm doing something right now just to see what kind of a response I get from the deer. These are some apples that a friend of ours gave us off of their apple tree on their farm. And what I've done, and this is a trick that my dad showed me several years ago. I'm pulling these things out of a plastic sack. But you leave some of them on the ground whole, like that, and then you take some of them, like this one, and you bust it open. What that's going to do is act as kind of a scent wick to the deer through the air currents of the presence of the apples, and it will draw them in. Now, the deer are probably going to come in here already with the corn that's on the ground right now that I just now put down. But what I'm trying to find out is whether or not they're actually going to take the apples, or whether or not they're going to leave them. Later in the season, they'll jump all over them. I'm trying to find out what they're going to do early in the season. I do want to take the chance to give the guys over at Fieldline who produced this Fieldline Pro Series backpack a big shout out and a thank you. This backpack that I've had the last several years has really gone through the ringer. I've drug this thing through the timber, through the woods, through the weather, through all kinds of things. It's been rained on, it's been snowed on, it's been through just about everything you can put a day pack like this through. I really like several of the features on it. One of the things that's especially good to me is the chest strap right here. When I've got a lot of things that I'm carrying, this buckle right here, this clasp, has been extremely helpful in keeping the pack on.
I carry a lot of things all at once. You can tell that it's been loved, it's been used. It certainly doesn't look brand new, but it's been a great pack, and I expect that I'll be using their products for quite some time in the future. So, Field Line, thanks guys. So quite likely the most important thing that I learned on today's scouting trip was that the acorns are actually dropping. It's not the white oak acorns that I'm looking for. That'll come a little bit later, but I will be keeping an eye on that very, very closely. But the pin oaks are absolutely dropping right now, and the deer are tearing them up. So are the squirrels, so is everything else, but the deer are especially tearing them up. I found droppings all over the place, and as I mentioned earlier, leaves shuffled everywhere. So something to keep track of, something to keep an eye on. Again, today's September 15th, 2019. Archery season opens up in 2 weeks, and I'm all kinds of excited for it. Now, this is not a deer hunting series. This channel is not dedicated solely and purely to deer hunting. But it is that time of the year. It's about to be in season, and harvesting in season is key to homesteading and self-reliance. So keep that in mind as you continue to watch, as we continue to do and put content and load content up on YouTube for you. Again, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your support. Drop a like, drop a subscribe if you haven't done it already. Encourage your friends to do the same thing. Let's travel this journey together. All right, everybody. I'm Bobby. This is Raw Courageous, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.